Are you ready for a story? This story is called Odin and the Tiny Creatures. It's based on a folktale from the Philippines. Long ago in the Philippines, there was a village in the jungle on the side of a mountain. The village was a quiet, peaceful little place. All the people were friends, and they always helped one another. If one person in the village was sick, other people in the village took care of that person. If a family's house was lost in a fire, everyone helped build the family a new house. It was a wonderful place to live. Until Odin moved to the other side of the mountain. Odin was not quite human. He was a big, terrifying, angry giant. He was taller than 3 adult giraffes and about as wide as 2 big elephants. His voice was so loud that he scared all the animals in the jungle, even when he whispered. And he was always in a terrible, angry mood. Every morning, Odin left his cave on the other side of the mountain and hiked over to the village. Then he stomped through the streets, knocking over houses, gobbling up people's fruit trees, and taking their cows, sheep, and chickens for his breakfast. After weeks of destruction, the people decided to do something. "We have to stop this horrible giant," they cried at a meeting in the village square. That night, the biggest, strongest, bravest men in the village climbed to the other side of the mountain and stood over Odin's cave. With the help of 2 large water buffaloes, the men moved 10 giant rocks from high above the giant's cave home. The rocks rolled down the mountain, landed in front of the cave, and blocked the opening. "We've trapped him in his home!" they shouted triumphantly. But the next morning, Odin kicked the giant rocks from the opening as if they were tiny pebbles. Then he hiked over the mountain and had his breakfast like he did every day. So the villagers thought of another plan. That day, the biggest men in the village cut down hundreds of trees and used them to build a tall, strong wooden wall around the village. But the next morning, Odin stomped over the mountain and kicked through the wall as if it were made of little sticks. Then he stomped through the village like he always did. "We cannot stop the giant. We have no choice. We must leave the village," cried the people at the next village meeting. "Wait, I can help," called out a strange, squawking voice. The people looked up and saw a parrot sitting in a tree. "Your biggest men can't solve your problem," cried Parrot, "but my tiny friends and I can." "How can tiny creatures fight a giant?" the people asked. "Just wait and you will see," answered Parrot. "Now tell me, where does this giant live?" "He lives in a cave on the other side of the mountain," said the people. Parrot flew off. Parrot called to 3 of his best friends. A crab crawled from behind a trash barrel, a mosquito flew from a puddle, and a fire ant crawled from a crack in a wall. "Friends, the giant is destroying the village. We must stop him," said Parrot. "If we don't, the villagers will leave." The creatures needed the villagers. Crab, parrot, and ant ate food that the villagers left in their trash, and mosquito ate the blood of the villagers. "We'll help," said the tiny creatures. "I have a plan," said Parrot, and the 3 friends listened to Parrot's plan. That afternoon, the tiny animals flew over the mountain. "The village people say that the giant's cave is on this side of the mountain," said Parrot. Soon they saw the cave mouth. Carefully, they looked inside. Odin was not home. He was away on an afternoon hike. Parrot said,
Now follow my plan, and we will get the giant to leave the village so that it becomes a peaceful place once again."
And the four fearless friends crept into Odin's home. Mosquito flew to the back of the giant's armchair and hid in a hole. Ant climbed up a leg of the giant's bed and slipped under the pillow. Crab crawled all the way up a table. Then he jumped into the water of a big bowl that Odin used for washing his face. Finally, Parrot hopped into the fireplace and hid behind a pile of ashes. Just when everyone was in place, the friends felt the ground shake and heard the heavy steps of the giant returning from his hike. Odin came into the cave, grabbed a bowl of pineapples that looked like little nuts in his hands, and sat in his armchair. As he ate his snack, Mosquito flew into Odin's ear. "This sound in my ear is awful," he cried. "Go away, Mosquito!" Odin jumped into bed and pulled the sheets over his head. That's when Ant crawled onto Odin's face and gave him a big bite on the nose. The bite felt like fire. "Ow!" cried Odin. Quickly, he ran to his washing bowl and splashed water on his face. But as Odin splashed water on his face, he splashed Crab onto his face too. Crab pinched Odin's chin as hard as he could. "Ah!" cried the giant, and he fell onto his knees in front of the fireplace. Mosquito was still in Odin's ear. Ant was still biting Odin's nose. Crab was still pinching his chin. Then Parrot flapped his wings, blowing ashes from the fireplace all over Odin's wet face. "My home is haunted!" cried Odin. He ran out of his cave screaming, disappeared into the jungle, and was never seen again. And that's how four tiny friends solved one giant problem. The end.